Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to this week's episode of Digital Law News, episode 30. So I'm Laura Spencer, and I'm an apprentice solicitor at Digital Law UK, and I'm joined with the Managing Director of Digital Law, Peter Wright. So this podcast is brought to you by Digital Law and produced by Anson Evaluate as well. So I'll just pass over to Peter just to give you a little bit of background about what we're going to be discussing today.
Indeed, thank you, Laura. And it's been a busy week of a lot of stories and indeed anticipated stories that we'll be discussing with you that have been in the news. And indeed, this discussion that we're recording today really reflects a lot of the conversations that we're having in the office every day that we wanted to share with you.
Thanks, Peter. So getting straight on with it then and starting with our first story. So this is in relation to Facebook. And about some of the stories that we've covered in the last couple of weeks as podcasts as well. So Facebook has attacked a sovereign nation and has shown tech giants think that are bigger than the government. Australia's politicians declare after it blocks news in row over paying for content. So Facebook have basically blocked Australia from accessing and sharing news on Facebook in protest of a new law that they're bringing in, which would require Facebook to pay for the news content that is shared on there. So the Prime Minister of Australia is furious about this and have said that the tech companies think they are bigger than the government and that rules do not apply to them, while others branded this action by Facebook as an insult on sovereign nations and abuse of their power. So I think this is important in a way because we mentioned last week how Europe was kind of wanting to go in the same direction as Australia and impose similar laws to them. So the question would be now whether Facebook would do the same in Australia and carry on banning news and everything in Europe as well.
Indeed, and this has been a massive story today. Mail Online is the world's most popular, highly visited news website, and this story was number one on their website, and they had a host of other stories, including an interview with a former Facebook Australia and New Zealand CEO, who basically the headline was, "You should delete the Facebook app from your mobile devices." So to say that things have kicked off between the government of Australia and Facebook is a bit of an understatement, to put it bluntly.
Yeah.
And this is this is unprecedented, really. When there are now surveys done of the general public to say, where do you get your news from? They no longer say at number one TV news bulletins. So whereas 30 years ago, people would sit down and watch the 6 o'clock news or the 9 o'clock news or the 10 o'clock news and get a half hour of this is what has happened today. Or they might listen to it on the radio. That is no longer the case. There is a sizable minority of people, in fact, pretty much the largest minority of people, about 40% say they get their news from social media and in particular from social media like Facebook. So you have organizations like Mail Online have a account with millions of followers on Facebook, and then they will trail stories throughout the day, picking up people who will then look at the post, click on the story if they're interested, but people are seeing it because it comes up in their newsfeed. And the proposed law here was to say that Facebook, when people end up visiting these news sites and seeing these stories, is in effect Facebook should be paying for it, because the social media companies have, over the years, picked up an awful lot of advertising revenue that otherwise would have been going to the newspapers themselves before social media came along.
Yeah.
Indeed, it's been the advertising that makes money for newspapers, not the actual cover price generally. That certainly used to be the case. So this is kind of where this has therefore come from. And it was threatened, as we covered in a previous episode, that this might happen. What is surprising is the fact that Facebook has made this decision today, and also the fact that not only have they cut off access to all news websites in Australia, they have also then cut off all access to any official government communications. So governments have been using social media to provide updates on the pandemic, to list information with regards to quarantine, with regards to test and trace, with regards to vaccination, and generally as an avenue of public messaging, knowing full well that so many people are on Facebook. If you want to tell them an important message, that's how you're going to communicate. So there has been a massive concern that suddenly a major channel that the governments have been using to communicate to their people has suddenly been switched off. The problem here as well is that because of the way this has been done, it doesn't really leave either party with a ladder to climb down. Facebook have done this hoping that the Australian government will see a backlash and will then say, okay, we will relent with the law that we are introducing. But the government of Australia in turn will be turning around saying, well, no. And you know, it's going to now be a bit of a clash of wills on this. And there's no easy way for either side to climb down and save face, unfortunately, which seems to be the story of the 21st century. So it's going to be very difficult to find a workable compromise now on this. But as you also say, Laura, this has implications in Europe. We have the Digital Services Act and Digital Markets Act, which is in draft form in the European Union and subject to lobbying. And already there is talk of an amendment being made to the draft text that would be very similar to what has been introduced in Australia. And it's one thing for Facebook to cut off the Australian market. It is quite another to turn around and cut off the European market of over 300 high net worth consumers. But again, this is the world we now find ourselves in. Europe might wake up the day after it passes the Digital Markets Act and find that Facebook has also switched off the ability of the European Union and the national governments to communicate to their people who are also users of Facebook as well. So real massive implications on this story today.
Yeah, absolutely. I think at first sight, it doesn't seem that there is such massive implications when you're looking at it. But when you discuss it in more detail, like you just have, you just see that the effects that this could have, especially during the pandemic that's going on at the minute. I usually find the latest updates on like the quarantine or what I need to do in terms of what I can and can't do on Facebook first. You see that a story's gone out on Facebook, and then you go to other news sources and try and look and find out the truth, because obviously there is like fake news about. But if that was to happen in Europe and across the Europe and UK, that could have a big impact on everything to do with that as well.
And it'll be interesting to see how people approach this. There seems to be a real backlash to Facebook initially today. There's been I think on Twitter it's been trending. I think either delete Facebook or take the app off your phone. Lots of anti-Facebook stuff has been trending on Twitter in Australia today, as people have said. Have reacted quite strongly against Facebook and seemingly in support of what the Australian government has done. But it'll now be interesting to see, well, how does this keep going? Will it be the case that people start turning against the Australian government if this functionality does not come back? It's also an interesting one to see how people react to it as a whole, because obviously if you're on Facebook and you rely on it for news, you're not going to be very happy about this. If you get your news from somewhere else, you're not really going to be massively bothered. If you do not have a Facebook account, it does not affect you, and you're wondering, why is everyone getting so angry about this? I think sometimes it's quite difficult to imagine. Laura, you and I are both on Facebook. We have, hundreds of friends on Facebook. It's how we stay in touch with friends and family. But we share a colleague here in the office who, despite being comparatively young in age, does not have a Facebook profile and has no plans to change that. And indeed, I was quite pleased to hear it when she said, I don't actually use Facebook. And you think, well, at first, oh, wow, well, how am I going to be able to share different things with you and be able to tell you about different things? But then you think, well, we'll have to do that old thing of having a conversation then, won't we? Rather than feeling the need to share it. And I think it is important to bear in mind that I think there is a whole generation that's coming through, some of whom share information freely and without thinking about it on social media, but then others who are growing up and thinking, I've got a real problem with regards to sharing this information, and I'm not even going to start building a profile and sharing the information on there that many others do. So
Yeah.
it will be interesting. Will it expose, in a way, the sort of social media and the Facebook haves and have-nots? And that's a discussion I'm really looking forward to seeing. I'm interested to see if you do get, say, a large number of young people saying, well, to be honest, we aren't bothered. We get our news from somewhere else, be it TikTok or wherever, frankly. But I'm interested to see if Facebook has the hold on a population that clearly it thinks it does.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure this will be one that we cover again and again as the more stories unfold and Facebook and Australia have this little battle. So moving on to our next story then. So this is in regards to the adequacy decision for the UK. So Brussels are currently on the verge of issuing a positive data adequacy decision in the UK, according to the Financial Times. So the Financial Times have come out with the story over the last couple of days and have said that they have seen a draft of an adequate decision in favour of the UK. So this would mean that the EU can send information, personal data to the UK without having to put any additional safeguards in place. So there was questions over whether a adequate decision would be granted in favour of the UK due to our strict security stance and how intrusive our security systems can be. However, I think it's important to note that we have obviously followed data protection regulations, especially the ones implemented by the EU for the last numerous of years, and do have a strong data protection regulator in the UK. So it's kind of the argument of whether this would be enough, and clearly it seems like it is to get an adequate decision.
Indeed. So we're looking at two adequacy decisions, one in respect of the flow of personal data, which is very important for businesses, everything from medicine to financial services to e-commerce. Very important that flow of data from servers and infrastructure in the European Union can flow to the UK, in particular if we think of the reliance that a lot of UK businesses have on servers based in Ireland, everything from Amazon Web Services to Apple to Microsoft. If you're using Office 365, then your personal data for your business could be located in the EU, and therefore having free access to that data is kind of essential for the continued operation of your business. And at the moment, the data can flow freely from the EU to the UK when you're an EU member. Since the UK left, we're now in an extended transition period for data, which expires very shortly. And the point here is that an adequacy decision would allow for the continual free flow of data from the EU to the UK. Now, you might ask the question, well, the UK was an EU member for 40 years, had data protection legislation before the EU did. The EU had its Data Protection Directive in 1995, whereas we had a UK Data Protection Act in, I believe it was 1988, or maybe even earlier than that. So, you know, we've always had good standards in terms of the protection of personal data in the UK. We have, as you say, Laura, a widely respected information commissioner in the UK that has carried out effective enforcement of GDPR and has even sought extraterritorial imposition when it comes to GDPR, for example, seeking to enforce against organisations based in Canada. Now, the point here, therefore, is that if the UK couldn't get an adequacy decision, well, frankly, who could? Because, you know, we've got GDPR written into UK law, we have the regulator, we were a member of the EU up until a matter of months ago, so we should be in pole position to get this. The problem is that adequacy really is a stricter test in terms of your data protection and security regime if you're outside of the EU seeking to get this, compared to if you're inside the EU, where, frankly, you can get away with quite a bit. And I think if the UK couldn't get an adequacy decision, I think you can probably look at probably half the EU member states who also wouldn't get an adequacy decision if they had to pass through the eye of a needle like the UK is trying to. And therefore, it's really a matter of looking at the fact that security legislation in the UK, the Investigatory Powers Act, has been criticised as meaning that data protection rights would be at risk because of the surveillance laws that we have. This is the reason why the US has never had an adequacy decision. It had the Privacy Shield, but that was destroyed by a decision of the European Court last year, the Schrems II decision. And there is a concern that a similar decision in the European Court could strike down any adequacy decision in favour of the UK. But nonetheless, it looks like we're going to get this adequacy decision, according to the Financial Times. They have seen this draft decision. And therefore, that will be in place for at least 4 years before it is then reviewed. And there's no reason why, if it were reviewed, it wouldn't continue. It may be subject to a judicial challenge. That could come in a few years' time. But, you know, you can get a judicial challenge to any government decision, be it in the UK or the EU. So adequacy is a good thing in terms of allowing those data flows. But one thing we are saying to all of our clients, Laura, is to bear in mind, do you really want to be at the whim of a judicial decision, making it difficult for you to access your data? So therefore, look at the following. If you are reliant on a third-party supplier for your data in the cloud, wherever it is, make sure you've got standard contractual clauses in that data sharing agreement. And if you are a multinational corporation with offices in the EU, UK, and anywhere else, consider getting binding corporate rules put in place. If you've got those, you've then got a fallback position just in case this adequacy saga continues to roll on.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's best to have a fallback plan, as you said. We've always been recommending that to our clients, especially when people rely on the UK to US Privacy Shield. That was struck down so quickly. I think that just proved how these judicial decisions can have the effects. And then it's like back to the drawing board in terms of getting the contracts renewed and reviewed and getting redrafted to incorporate these safeguards. So it's best just to have them in from the offset.
Exactly. I think there's a temptation with an adequacy decision to think, oh, well, that's all right. That kicks this into the long grass. We don't have to worry about it. But to be frank, I would want to use the window of opportunity that adequacy decision gives you to, as you say, use that opportunity, do something about it. So then if the adequacy decision falls, it won't impact your company, and you can sit there very happily, you know, drinking a glass of wine on the veranda going, well, we're perfectly fine. It's everyone else that's going to have a problem. And I would rather be in that position. If I was a compliance officer reporting to a board, I would want to be able to give the assurance we're on top of this, we've done it, we are insulated, and we are minimising our risk to any possible challenge that could come out of the European Union to this adequacy decision.
Absolutely. So I think, as Peter mentioned at the start of this, there will be a decision about this probably coming out within, I think it was supposed to come today, but it will be about in the next couple of days, as we're assuming anyway.
Indeed, we expect it in the next few days, certainly. So it's imminent, I think, is the point. But no, I'm sure if it hasn't come out next week, we'll be talking about it then as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So moving on to our next story then. So this is in regards to hacking, and that 2.6 million people in the UK are actually unlikely to take action following a data breach. So this is just basically a story about some research that has been carried out and by a law firm, and they have actually found that there is a lack of knowledge in the UK and around cybersecurity and data breaches, where people are still reluctant to take action in the event of a personal data breach or their personal data being stolen or lost. So 56% of those actually surveyed in this research were admitted to being unsure of what action they can take or what action to take if such thing happened. Only 39% of people as well said that they know how to secure their personal data, and only 32% of the people who were surveyed actually were aware that what criminals can then do with their personal data as well. So I think a lot of people are aware that their personal data can be stolen and can be lost, and some people are aware of what the effects can have, but a lot of people aren't aware of like things that they can do. So maybe identity theft and things like that, as well as what actions they can take afterwards. So joining on to a class lawsuit or basically exercising their rights under the Data Protection Act as well.
Yeah, thanks. So, I mean, this is a fascinating story. I think it covers the fact that we've started to get a little bit more familiar in the UK in recent years with the fact that you can claim for certain things. So we've had the infamous PPI. Have you made a
Yeah,
claim of a PPI? Are you entitled? And the funny thing is that claiming for PPI is actually quite a laborious process. You know, you see the advert, you get in touch, you get a load of information, you have to confirm, you know, what did you take out when you took out the loan? Did it cover this payment protection insurance? Did you want or need it? And there's actually quite a bit of background stuff. In
yeah,
comparison, if you were actually to join a class action for data protection breach, it's pretty straightforward. All you need to do is say, here is the email I had from the organization that told me my data had been lost, which they're required to send to you if you are an affected data subject by data protection breach. And that's it.
yeah,
If you have any more information, if you have, you know, after that, the date of that email, say you are then notified that someone's opened a credit card in your name and you are a victim of credit card or identity fraud or other thing, great. You could supply that and then actually then be compensated for any loss you've suffered as a result of fraud. But the point here with regards to a general claim in respect of a data protection breach is that you can actually expect to receive compensation of a couple of £1,000s or euros, depending on the sensitivity of the data that is affected. And this actually, I mean, there have been some quite large payments. I think the largest one in the UK so far was a chap who received about £10,000 because his criminal record was breached. You know, no one particularly wants to have a printout from the police national computer floating around the internet. So he got a 5-figure settlement. Usually you'd be looking at about less than half that, because you're not usually looking at things like, you know, criminal records or medical records being shared. But it always comes down to the complexity of the record and the sensitivity of what's actually been breached. But, you know, as I say, it's not as though you're going to go to a huge amount of hard work to therefore join one of these class actions. There are lots of class actions currently up and running. I think there's one with regards to the British Airways data breach, Oracle and Salesforce. There's class actions there. And there's a growing number all the time. But it looks like at the moment it hasn't had the cut through with the public that things like PPI have done. So it'll be interesting to see, does that change? Do we start getting loads of adverts on daytime TV saying, has your data been breached? Join our claim, you know, call here for more information. That could be the next logical step, though, to be frank, not one that I look forward to it happening. There's enough inane adverts like that on daytime TV and satellite TV without us getting even more.
yeah, absolutely. And I think the important thing to come out of this is basically just reminding companies that they have to inform data subjects of their rights to do with such things in their privacy policy. So we all know that that companies and data processors, data controllers have to inform data subjects of the right to erasure, rectification, restriction of processing, the access and the portability as well as basically informing them that they have the right to complain and other rights under GDPR, so the right to be informed about data protection breach and so on as well.
Exactly, that should indeed be in any good privacy policy. But Laura, you'll know from the number of times that we're asked to review privacy policies by clients that first come to us and say, well, we've got a privacy policy, and we take a look at it, and the things you've just discussed are fundamentally absent. So that privacy policy will fail at the first hurdle. It's not protecting the data subject. It's not protecting the company as a data controller either. And that kind of reinforces there the importance of having a good privacy policy, which isn't a difficult thing to do, but that's where it's worth having that bit of expert input, so you can then know conclusively that this is what we need to have in order to discharge and demonstrate discharge our responsibilities and demonstrate compliance under GDPR.
Absolutely. So staying on the data breach front then, so this is in regards to 3.2 billion emails and passwords that have been leaked. So from reading this story, it seems that more than 3.2 billion emails and passwords a pair have been posted online over the last couple of months, years. It is unknown. It's unknown how long this has been going on for. But the data has been compiled from various breaches, it seems, over various platforms, including Gmail, Netflix and LinkedIn as well. So online users who have the same login and password for various different sites seem to have been largely impacted by this, and it's currently unclear how much of this data has been used for further wrongdoings as well. So just one of the examples of one of the breaches that has been added to this problem is the breach that took place by Slack, and this took place 2 years ago. But basically they had users' passwords and usernames on their servers in plain text, so unencrypted. So I think it just highlights the importance of encrypting data and informing data subjects if there has been a breach as well.
Indeed. Thanks for that. I think that it's interesting there actually when you just ran through the list of companies that it looks like have been affected by this breach.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to highlight as well the fact that we've talked about under GDPR, you have to tell the data subjects if there's been a breach. You're also under a requirement to report that there's been a breach to your data protection regulator within 72 hours. So this is all statutory requirements in the EU and in the UK because we have GDPR transposed into UK law. But if you're an American corporation, there is no requirement to tell the data subjects or a regulator. Well, there is no regulator in the US at a federal level, and certainly there's no requirement to tell data subjects. So I'm aware that advice to boards and corporations in America is, if you have a data protection breach, try and keep as quiet as you possibly can about it, which is a total different approach compared to, of course, what we have in the EU. But you can imagine the difficulty for a global corporation like Netflix to try and understand that you have very different responsibilities if that information relates to your European account holders compared to your US and international ones. And indeed, if you are then telling your European account holders your data has been breached and not telling the US ones might justifiably turn around and say, hang on, that's not very fair. So it's a bit of a catch-22 for them, really. And I mean, the interesting thing is how long can the US conceivably hold out against getting better control with regards to its personal data and having a federal data protection act? I mean, who knows? It's still the Congress in the US is on such a knife edge with its, you know, a straight tie in the Senate that's decided by the vice president, giving them a majority of 1 in effect. And it's still quite a narrow majority for the Democrats in the lower house of representatives. It means, I think it's when President Biden has a long list of things that he'd like to achieve in his term, would getting a federal data protection law be one of them? Probably not. But it's things like this that I think make it quite confusing for those global corporations to think, well, how should we respond to this? And we have to have one plan for how to respond in Europe and another to respond in respect of US users, which I think makes it a little bit more difficult for them at a global strategic level to properly get a handle on this. But the outcome is a truly massive leak. I mean, good grief, there's only, 7 billion people on Earth, and we've got data affecting 3.2 billion of them appears to have been affected here.
Yeah, it is really big, but I think that's the point. When I was reading this article earlier as well, I was like, oh, Gmail, Netflix, LinkedIn. Like, I didn't know any of those had data protection breaches. Like, surely if they did have a breach and it was in the public, we would have seen it, because we're doing these podcasts every week. We're talking about all the breaches that go on that are in the public eye. So yeah, I think it does come down to the fact that they are American companies and kind of can get away with not telling the data subjects because they do reside in America and they are run there, and they don't have the Data Protection Act like we do over here in the UK and across Europe.
Yeah.
So moving on to the next story today then. So this is in regards to the new UK Cyber Security Council, that it will be the official governing body for training and standards in the UK. So the government has set up a new independent body to boost career opportunities and professional standards for UK's booming cybersecurity sector. So the role of the UK Cybersecurity Council will be to set standards and define career and learning paths for the Cybersecurity Centre, as well as providing a simple one-stop shop for information on people looking to enter into such a career path, and also actively pursuing opportunities to attract more talent and increase diversity in the cybersecurity workplace. Just the final part that they are going to be in charge of dealing with as well is to work with training providers and to accredit courses and qualifications in order to give employers the information and confidence that they need to effectively recruit in this market as well. So it's important to mention that this is going to be working closely with the NCSC, a well-known body already in the UK, working with things to do with cybersecurity as well.
Indeed. I think this is not a moment before time, because at the moment there are a huge number of sort of potential certifications out there that say, you know, get our qualification in showing that you know what you're doing when it comes to cybersecurity, that are utterly meaningless and have about just as much value as a token you've got off the back of a pack of cereal. The only one that's worth its salt is the UK government Cyber Essentials scheme, which is whereby organisations can get Cyber Essentials or Cyber Essentials Plus, and then that means that they have minimum standards in place with regards to cybersecurity, and is a big help when it comes to, for example, tendering for public procurement exercises. But if you are a organisation seeking to help others with regards to cyber, or an individual consultant, how can you effectively say, I know what I'm talking about? And this body will be able to properly look at putting clear standards in place and training to allow you to achieve those standards, and at least certifying it and saying this is something we believe is good, verifiable, and also being able to then rule out those that don't meet the standards that the UK Cybersecurity Council says. So not a moment before time. I think one thing that might have prompted this actually is that the UK government jobs website that was set up during the pandemic to say, for all those poor people who, you know, work in the hospitality sector or events or music and entertainment, that of course have been hit heavily in the pandemic, they have, you could go along to a website and it would say, well, this is what I do and what should I possibly consider retraining as? And I know a musician, a very well-renowned banjo player, who of course hasn't had a gig at all since March of last year. And they went on to the site and it said, you should be a cybersecurity expert. And that's what she's retrained as. So at least it hopefully helps with diversity there, getting a field that is universally an incredibly male, middle-aged one to be a little bit more diverse. But also having this sort of body in place will give people like that who are looking to enter the industry and add value proper, clear route maps and pathways into it without being frankly bemused by all these different standards that, as I say, at the moment don't really mean an awful lot.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's the thing here as well. It does encourage diversity in it, and I know the NCSC always encourage diversity. They have always got like thing on their website encouraging like women to get into cybersecurity and things like that as well.
It's not a moment too soon. If I have to go to another conference for cybersecurity professionals full of middle-aged men who want to talk about football, I think I'm going to scream. So it can't come soon. More diversity of thought around the table, if nothing else, when we're looking at this stuff. And if all your ideas are coming out, as I say, from middle-aged guys, you're only going to get a very narrow mindset there. So the more diversity of thought involved in the industry, the better, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. So moving on to the next story then. So this is one from the ICO. So they have launched a data analytics toolkit. So this is part of their AI priority work, and they're urging all organisations who are considering using data analytics on personal data to look at this new toolkit before they actually carry out any of the analytics. So the toolkit just takes organisations through some of the key points and data protection points they need to think about from the outset of any project they are planning to undertake involving data analytics and personal data. So I think here it's just important that they are saying from the outset as well. We always recommend to our clients that if they are undertaking a new project that is highly to do with personal data and processing all new personal data, and that they don't currently do, or in a different way, they need to carry out a DPIA just to basically assess what impact that would have.
Indeed, I think this is a fantastic piece of kit. I mean, we were talking earlier on about the ICO being a good regulator when it comes to data protection. I mean, here they are actually telling you, here's the toolkit, go ahead and use it so you can demonstrate compliance with what we're looking for.
Yeah.
They're just trying to get that message across of think about this at the start. So if you should be doing a DPIA at the start of any project, you should also be using this analytics tool. And that really is key. This isn't something to do as a band-aid halfway through a design project to suddenly think, oh, actually, we need to look at the analytics. Is it actually compliant with the law in England and Wales? Well, no, you do this at the ahead of time. And Laura, you know that we've sometimes got quite frustrated when we sort of sat down with different industry groups. I remember going to a round table held in the same building where our office is, and they were looking at trying to hack healthcare, and they were coming up with ideas. Well, we could build apps to do this and build apps to do that, and really help to provide care solutions to people. And yes, have you thought how you're going to comply with this from a data protection perspective? And none of them wanted to know. They thought we were just being awkward and difficult. But no, we're trying to get you to think about demonstrating compliance at the start and do it cheaply, rather than pushing off building something and then suddenly thinking, oh, how do we make sure this is secure? How do we minimize the risk? Yeah, doing that at the start will make your build a darn sight more straightforward and less problematic, rather than trying to then sort of retrospectively put a band-aid on or put a bandage around something that's going to end up being a problem until you end up doing the next version or the next iteration of your system. So it's just good planning, and I can't fault the ICO with this. It's now just a job of making sure that everyone is aware of it, but I'd certainly urge everyone to take a look at it on the ICO website, which I think is ico.gov.uk.
Yeah, very important one to look at. So the last story for today then is in relation to spy pixels and their use in emails that has become an epidemic. Sorry, I can't speak today. So basically, this is the use of invisible tracking tech in emails, and how, according to the messaging service, they are becoming ever so popular. So this review carried out then by the messaging service Hey actually indicated that 2/3 of emails sent to its users contained a spy pixel, which even included their spam emails as well. So from the research they have carried out, the emails that they sent actually logged when the email is opened, how many times it is opened, from what device or devices were involved in its opening, and the user's physical rough location of where they open that email by using the IP address. So the tracking pixels used by companies are usually in a form of a GIF or a PNG file that are so small that are like a 1x1 pixel inserted into the header, the footer, or the body of the email, and sometimes impossible to spot by the human eye just by looking at an email because they are that small. So I think from looking at the research as well, they found that other companies such as British Airways, TalkTalk, Vodafone, Sainsbury's, Tesco, HSBC, ASOS and Unilever are also among the brands in the UK that are detected of using these pixels in their day-to-day communication with their customers as well. So I think this is just a very widespread thing that a lot of the members of the public probably aren't even aware of that is happening.
Thanks, Laura. I think first of all, this story wins our weekly prize for how can you get a word associated with a pandemic into your headline. The other week it was fraud was becoming. There was an epidemic of fraud, according to the Royal United Services Institute. This week we have spy pixels are endemic, just to attach the attention of a populace that's already suffering fatigue from a global pandemic. But there you go. And the thing here is that this technology, pixels in emails, as you say, has mushroomed in popularity. There is a significant question mark over the legality of this technology if the user receiving it hasn't consented to it.
Yeah.
And I think it's quite worrying when you've listened to some of the corporations that appear to be using this in all of their email correspondence. It's one thing if it's used in marketing emails that people will hopefully be receiving that marketing communication under one of the 6 bases under GDPR that you can send information to people, because you're processing the data under either consent or legitimate interest or contract or vital interest or any of those other 6 issues that we mentioned under Article 6. But very difficult, I think, to justify the use of the spy pixel in something that isn't a marketing email. Say just a general, reply to a customer services email, or an email supplying a product or service that you have asked to receive. To have this sort of technology embedded in it without the clear knowledge and consent of the recipient raises some quite problematic areas. And it'll be interesting to see if this continues. Does it continue to get to the point where it's actually how many emails don't have pixels embedded in them, frankly? And Laura, I think you and I were looking at this for a client quite recently where the client confirmed that they used pixels in their communications, and we were saying, well, hang on, just make sure that you're doing this in the communications where you have a legitimate reason to do that. So yes, in the marketing perhaps, but if you're doing this in your customer service reply emails and getting in touch with customers, that might be a bit of a problem.
Yeah, absolutely. I think even if you do have that legitimate interest or consent, you're relying on the correct legal basis in order to send like marketing emails with these pixels. I think it's just important to raise that this information should still be added into the privacy policy. Like, companies need to be transparent in terms of the information they are collecting. So obviously these emails collect the IP address. You can find the physical location of where the email is opened, the device it's being used on, and things like that as well. Even to customer behaviour in terms of when they're opening emails, when they tend to be looking at things and stuff like that. So it's just important that all this information is being transparent, just like the data subject rights that we were discussing earlier in the privacy policy from the offset, and are given to the client, and they are basically being shown this privacy policy, even if they don't register through your website, even if they just their email is given in the store or something as well.
Exactly, got it in one, Laura. And I think the key thing here is, don't think that, oh, well, we have a privacy policy on our website, but that only involves traffic on the website and communications that we send to customers and for marketing communications. That's different. Well, no.
Yeah.
Have a comprehensive privacy policy on your site that covers all of this. Be open and transparent. Don't try to hide behind ambiguity and obfuscation. It's a matter of being very, very clear with how your organization processes personal data. And if you are using these pixels, and you are storing this data in terms of what device is used to open it, when it's opened, what the IP address is in, how many times it was opened. Yeah, I think the recipient has a right to know that you are collecting that information with the GDPR. So don't, as I say, leave it in a sort of ambiguous or questionable situation. Be open, honest, and transparent. And then if anyone does ask the question, are you using this technology? You can come back and say, well, yes, but it is in our privacy policy. And it's very clear.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's everything we've got time for today. So just a little reminder to our listeners, we still have the special offer on our GDPR compliance manual for legal practices. So this is down from £195 to £99. So I'll just pass over to Peter just to give you a little bit more information about this.
Indeed, so this is our GDPR compliance manual that has forms and templates and checklists to help your organization get a handle on its GDPR compliance. So it will help you if you're looking to carry out a data privacy impact assessment. It will give you an idea on making sure that you are demonstrating compliance with regards to your communications, with regards to your data storage. Also, it works not just in relation to your electronic data, but there's tips in there with regards to running your office, how you're storing paper documents, paper files. While it is designed for law firms, the standards in here work across various regulated sectors. So we've had clients that are accountants who found this quite a useful guide as well. So can highly recommend it, and it is indeed available for that reduced price. So please do get in touch if you would like a copy.
Thank you, Peter. Just a reminder for everyone as well. So this recording is available as a webinar and is available to view on demand via our YouTube channel, website, and any podcast channels as well. So thank you once again to Anson Evaluate for helping us produce this webinar and podcast, and we will see you all next week.